I started talking who lives in the other side of the country.
That's fine. I won't hit record yet.
If
But I have gone live, so the stream is streaming.
That's fine.
I don't think your work has nearly as many secrets as mine does that it would be a problem if you...
Talking about a config file. You realize my whole job right now is manage a config file. One config file. That's
it's funny.
Job now.
I actually have a whole...
4-day a week job. Manage a config file.
I have... And I think I can say this won't be secret.
Like,
I have...
Imagine if you worked for MySQL, right? And your job was you're the my.conf guy. Like
I have an entire team who manages the tools that are used to manage one particular config file at my work. And I have another team I work with, and they own the thing that reads that config file to configure itself. I have two teams, like 2/6 of the engineering teams I'm directly responsible for are managing a config file or using the config file that is managed. And I can say that it is a .ini for silly reasons. All right, I think everything's good here. Yeah, my opening bit will just be a vague pitch for Blades in the Dark. Oh, that's right. I guess it's going to be available in another platform, too. We've been using Roll20, but we could try the other stuff. Wow, wow, wow. See, I pooped, but I also finished writing my, 2-page long email.
This person messaged me after you were done pooping.
That's fair. That's fair.
All right, I'm done with them now.
All right, I've hit record.
I have also pressed the button of record.
All right, stream looks like it's working. Everything looks good. So, sometimes the Blades in the Dark game that we started playing, not Scott, but me and a bunch of other people at the start of quarantine so long ago, coincides with Tuesday Geek Nights, and sometimes, depending on our schedule and modulus math, it is opposite Tuesday Geek Nights. But tonight, it is actually opposite. It is actually happening right after Geek Nights, meaning I do have a hard limit on this show, but I don't think we'll run into any problem. But I got to say, I made me realize this is by far not the longest tabletop RPG campaign I've played in terms of hours or even sessions, because anything I do in the rest of my life is going up against Rim in middle school and high school having fucking nothing to do but play D&D for like 12 hours literally every Sunday.
Right. So if you play even 1, 2, 3 hours right, every other week, it's like
12
hours. You got to do 3 or 4 sessions just to catch up with one old session.
I had like one campaign that lasted 3 years of high school almost every Sunday. It was, never mind all the shit we did at RIT, in those lounges. So, but as an adult, it is actually... I love tabletop RPGs. It's a topic that Scott and I talk about a lot on Geek Nights. The first
I haven't played one in a very long time.
The first PAX panel we ever did was called Beyond Dungeons and Dragons, where we had a lot of big opinions about tabletop RPGs. And I got to say, it is profoundly refreshing to play a long-running campaign, because a lot of the systems we've played and we talk about, they're great for one-offs, but one-offs are sort of their own thing. And there are actually RPGs that are designed to do a one-off really well. But Blades in the Dark and Burning Wheel in particular are two games that I think really only shine, and you really get to flex them and see exactly how well designed they are if you play a long campaign that goes from the low sort of early power levels all the way up to as far as the game is designed to go.
Of course. I mean, that's something that's common to, I think, a lot of tabletop RPGs, especially the ones with big books, right? Is that, you just want to use all the parts of the book, right?
Oh my God, as a kid with that Dungeons and Dragons encyclopedia, which isn't even the good old D&D.
How good the game is or whatever. It's like it has all these parts in the book, and it's like you're only ever using like a small section of those parts. It's like anytime I can use a new part of the book, it's like that in itself is fun, right? So a lot of RPGs, the ones that are designed for long campaigns, have parts of the book that are like, you know, oh, here's the progression rules.
I mean, D&D Encyclopedia had
one-off.
the keep rules. Hey, you want to run a keep? Here's how to run a keep.
Right. It's like, you know, all these rules of that nature, right? Just don't come into play unless there's multiple sessions.
Yeah. Like
so if a game has those rules, you want to play multiple sessions.
Yeah.
Right.
So
if a game doesn't have those rules, it's like if you play one session, you actually used all the pages in the book pretty much, then it's like, all right.
So
you don't feel that need to, you know, not that it's you couldn't or you might not enjoy it.
Well, case in point, Burning Wheel, a one-off
urge is not there.
A one-off or a short session does not have like there's no cycle of Arda. You get some art, you're going to use all your Arda by the end. You're going to blow your whole wad by the end of whatever session you're playing, no matter what mechanics might exist to further that. So I'm not going to tell the story of our Blades in the Dark game, but what I will say is that we've played a game where the Powder Ghosts, some basically shit-tier little group of mostly bad people who are causing problems on purpose. We've got
so far every Blades in the Dark.
Oh
game
yeah,
ever.
We've risen to the level of being a strong tier 3. Like, we're stronger than the cops now. Like, we actually are a large criminal enterprise, and we have played the entire way there. In fact, our current season that we're playing tonight, we just got out of prison. We were all in prison for 3 years.
How are you so strong if you were in prison?
Because we were pretty fucking strong when we went into prison, and you realize there's rules for playing in prison. There's holdings in prison.
I'm sure there are. You know, you ever see like a mafia boss? He's in prison, but usually it's only 1 or 2 guys in the prison as like sort of taking turns.
Well, we had some people. We had parts of the gang out. Some people were outside of prison, like our goons were outside of prison. We had some ghosts outside of prison, but we were in prison.
If all the leaders are in the prison, that's going to be the end of your little family, right? But if, you know, some in, some out, okay, that's...
You realize there is a holding you can get in the regular rules of Blades in the Dark in Ironhook Prison where you control a cell block top to bottom. That is your lair.
Sure, but you got to... If you're not interacting and holding power from within the prison upon the outside world, that's not, you know...
Oh yeah, so right now our sessions are around, we are back in the real world and we're checking on what all our underlings were up to and how the Empire's going and making some corrections, let's say, to what happened while we were in prison. But from session 1, I looked at those prison rules and I was like, I gotta get into that fucking prison. I want to play those rules. We played them. We have touched almost all the rules, and I cannot recommend Blades in the Dark enough as a system. If you want to tell fun stories, but do not want to have to prepare basically at all as a game master if you don't want to. So a little geek bite before we get into the news. I did play a bunch more of Cult of the Lamb because, you know, we talked about it on another Geek Nights.
I haven't actually played it yet.
It is exactly what I thought it was. It really, honestly struggles from the ActRaiser problem in that half of it is a cute and fun but very simplistic sim town, and the other half of it is just Binding of Isaac with melee. It's like less good Hades, I hate to say, and that's basically 90% of the gameplay is Binding of Isaac style Hades, like almost directly. And as cute as the game is, like, I'm probably going to beat it at least once because this game is absolutely adorable. Every part of the style and the story is great. The Simtown is fun, but the gameplay itself, just like Binding of Isaac, I am bouncing off of it with increasing vertical altitude as I bounce further.
At least based on what you said, taking it in good faith, right? Yep. It reminds me a bit of Racketeer, the game with the
yeah,
right? And in that game, it's like, oh, running the shop, but actually, a large portion of that game is just low quality action RPG stuff. Like, you got to go, you hire a hero, and you go out and you really crappy Secret of Mana Zelda style hit monsters. Yep. Right, to collect loot to sell in the shop, and it's like, just remove that part of the game. Shop only, right?
Honestly, Cult of the Lamb town only would be better than Cult of the Lamb for me.
Cult of the Lamb, it's like they sold it on the Animal Crossing part, at least in the stuff that I saw, the buzz I heard. So if it's true that only a small portion of it is the Animal Crossing part, if it's an ActRaiser where the town part is only half the game, like, why did you put this other game in there? Just make the one game that's the good part. Polish that, expand it. Don't throw in some other.
But I guess what's really bugging me is like Binding of Isaac was fine. I played it. It was an okay game. A lot of people got really into it. People are getting into Cult of the Lamb. It's just they both share a very loose and floaty control style and a very like it is almost the polar opposite of the tightness of the timing of Hades. And that is what's bugging me personally about it. So I think you should play it at some point. I think we should do a full review of it. I want to beat it before I pass full judgment, but my initial experience is I don't want to say this game is all style, no substance, but the style is so good compared to the substance that it's actually kind of irritating me. I almost want to just play Animal Crossing that looks and feels like this.
There are many games with a lot of style and no substance for you to enjoy.
I mean, there's many things on Earth that are like that. Remember Noir?
Yeah. All right. So in the news, right? Unknown Worlds Entertainment, the game development studio that brought you such classics as Natural Selection 1.
Oh, fuck yeah. Bring back that
Natural
cheese.
Selection 2.
I kind of want to play that again. It's been a while.
Subnautica, which I haven't played, but is lauded. Right?
You should play it in VR. I can lend you a VR headset.
That's okay. They have a new game coming out soon. It is going to the planned release date. It's confusing because Steam says early access on it, right? You can't actually get it early access yet. It says release date September 29th, which is
right.
I thought it was going to be yesterday. I misread it. It's a month from now. But is that going to be early access then, or is it going to be released then? There's a play now button for the play test, right? But that play now button is there because I already requested to join the playtest and I was accepted. But even though I was accepted, I still cannot download or play because the playtest hasn't started yet, but there's still a play button. But anyway, there are videos and screenshots and descriptions of this game. What it is a turn-based combat game. Like a Warhammer type, right? Miniatures, right? But even though it's a video game, it's presented as if there was a tabletop game that was this.
That is intriguing to me.
Like you're not in XCOM, when you move a dude in XCOM, that's a dude, right? Imagine if a dude in XCOM had like a little base around his feet. It's like it was a miniature, not a dude, right? The thing that's most fascinating to me is that they actually are going to try to simulate like the full miniatures game experience. Like you can paint the miniatures digitally, right? It's like they're really going all out with this. There is a miniatures game called Moonbreaker and you're playing it digitally.
Now that is what I am so intrigued by, because if I lived in a house and it wasn't COVID times and I had more free time, so already there's a lot of ifs there, I would have so many fucking miniatures for miniature fucking combat type games. I actually really love that stuff. I
definitely have a lot of nerdy shit that I didn't have now, but yeah, this game, is it going to be good? Is it going to be bad? Who knows? Another interesting fact about the game is that, much like Netrunner, right? The original Netrunner was set in the Cyberpunk universe, the same one, that the Cyberpunk video game is, Cyberpunk 20, whatever the RPG was in, right? The R. Talsorian Cyberpunk universe. The Android Netrunner was called Android Netrunner because it was set in the Android universe. That was Fantasy Flight Games created that universe just to have some intellectual property to make games on, right? Rather than always licensing things. And likewise, they made the Keyforge universe.
Yeah.
Here, right? Unknown Worlds is taking the same cue. They have created a new fantasy sci-fi universe in which to put their game. so that they don't have to license any IP.
Yep.
And they hired Brandon Sanderson.
The guy who, if you somehow don't know, was given the mantle of finishing the Wheel of Time.
Yeah. Didn't he also write many D&D?
Oh, yeah. He's got a lot going on. There's a lot. I'll link to his Wikipedia. There's way more than just the Wheel of Time. Though the Wheel of Time, I think, is the only works of his I have read.
Anyway, Brandon Sanderson was in charge of creating the fictional sci-fi universe in which this miniatures game takes place. Yet it's all a video game. I am hopeful with obviously zero expectations, but this has the potential, at least, to become like, a game that I could invest myself in with some significant.
That's what I was about to say. This could be a lifestyle game, or at least a long haul game, if it's good.
Right. It could be a game that you get other people to play easily. It doesn't seem like it has any microtransaction BS that's not cosmetic. You can paint the minis, so I don't know what the hell cosmetic shit there would be. Just paint them. They're gonna sell.
The only thing I have to decide: do I try to paint them to look good, or do I do what I did as a kid and paint them badly, kind of on purpose because I don't care, and make that my aesthetic?
Yeah, whatever. It's I think that's the self.
I want the aesthetic of I literally dipped this in. I dipped this in thinned paint.
But I think this is a game that I could get people to play with me, right?
Oh yeah.
So if it's any good, so I'm excited for Moonbreaker is the game. Look for it on Steam. Maybe next month we can play it if that's your jam.
Yeah. In some other news,
Before we learn that it's crap and stop playing it.
So there's a lot going on in the story I'm about to talk about. But what was fascinating to me is that I curate the media I follow very tightly. I don't follow that many Twitter accounts. I have very specific places I go to get the internet. And this is one of those situations where I encountered the debunking of a thing before I encountered the bunking. And in fact, the bunk never at any point entered my social circle except some of our own friends responding to my debunking with skepticism.
Right. Well, so I think that happens a lot when you are someone who does cull and really highly curate your media feeds.
You see a bunch. You see
anyone,
it's like gravity.
Any source that is going to, propagate bunk or create bunk information is not going to be in your feed. But debunkers, right? Truthful people are probably going to be in your feed. And, because of their original content that they're creating, just because they have, but if some bunk happens in their field of interest, then you might see them debunk something and be like, what are they debunking?
Yeah.
Because some garbage you don't follow because it's garbage.
It's like using gravity.
I think a lot, actually.
To find out that a black hole exists. You see all this stuff, all these tweets orbiting something, but you've never seen the thing. And that's when you type a Google search, you take a bunch of random keywords from all these tweets just to see what the fuck everyone's talking about. Because everyone talking about it assumes you have seen the bunk. Mm-hmm. So, some garbage-tiered news outlet like GLHF reported that Amazon was buying Electronic Arts.
That's believable given the state of the world, and we know that Electronic Arts was seeking to be bought or might still be.
So this is where I have specialized knowledge.
Amazon is big enough to buy them, though.
It was not believable in that particular time, a few days ago, in this particular place, for a lot of reasons that if you pay attention to M&A and corporate stuff would be obvious. Also, this kind of thing would not be broken by an outlet like this. This kind of thing would be picked up on by financial analysts based on data and chatter long before it hit any journalists.
Well, it would also be reported by more than one place and by reputable places and not some website no one ever heard of before today. Right?
Yep. So what I want to do, what I'll link to is Jason Schreier actually tore this fucking story apart, just sublimely. And you can read his Twitter thread to see exactly what went down. But
I feel like this place actually got what, it's like they actually succeeded. It's like we didn't know who they were. Now we know who they are. It's like
all I have to say to good luck, have fun is
about,
good luck, have fun. So not only did they fuck up, but USA Today, which I guess republish it, like uses them as a contributor.
Right. People don't realize Forbes, the website Forbes, which seems legit because it was originally a magazine. It was originally a rich dude. Like it was a legitimate publication of sorts. Is you can just pay money basically, effectively, to just publish things on Forbes.com. Like,
there's a lot of things like that. Like Bob's Guide is like that. There's all these websites.
USA Today, the newspaper, is like a real newspaper, right? You get it in hotels usually, right? But it's a network. Like there are small journalistic outfits around the country, right? And maybe around the world also, that are all part of the USA Today network. And it's like the actual USA Today can basically like republish the things that those other places publish, and they're all connected somehow loosely. I don't really fully understand it, but it's like the USA Today itself, their journalistic integrity standards are not universally applied to all of those little outfits, right? Which are operating independently.
Yep. USA Today disavowed them, threw them under the bus, edited their story to remove all that nonsense. So you can read the story. The part I actually want to speak to is, how was I so 100% sure this was fake? Because I can outline a heuristic you can follow, our favorite word, that's very simple for this kind of news. Number one, if there is a news of any kind, the bigger the story, the more this applies. And there is only one primary source reporting it, and all the rest of the news people are talking about it, but they're all citing that one. Like it's all a circle and it all points back to one website. If that is it, and there is not only no second source, but also there is no background chatter whatsoever, like rumblings that were happening for a while, chatter in professional circles related to this. Not only is the story probably false, but the fact that there is no chatter and that there is only one source implies that the story is probably the opposite of what is actually true. And in fact, someone might be trying to directly manipulate you.
Yeah, I have seen several instances of the only one weird website is reporting something, and then other people somehow start talking about it, and it all links back to the one place. And in 100% of the instances that I have seen so far in my life, the news was wrong. It has never been correct, not even one time so far.
So at least wait for two separate legitimate news organizations, not like Fox News or some crap, but like real news. And if two of them independently report on the story, you're probably good to go. But the second part, if you have yourself professional connections or knowledge about the area where the news is happening, like in this case, corporate M&A, I actually have some experience with financial stuff. Like I have access to lots of interesting data. I can check on some of this. You might have access to what we call chatter, which is basically non-reportable background noise. Like you might see, inside of, the Bloomberg terminal, there's a bunch of rumors that have been circulating for months leading up to this. Or you might be in a Discord with a bunch of game devs and people are talking about this situation before that news happens. If there is chat, or the Ukraine war, the news didn't break that Russia had fully invaded Ukraine right away. But if you were filtering sources like FARC and like looking at the overall background chatter, there was a shape to that chatter that implied something way bigger was happening. If that is true,
we're talking about Russia, are they going to invade ? For like weeks, months, maybe even. And then when it actually happened, the news wasn't, oh my God, they did it. It happened. It was, oh, they did it. It actually happened now, right? It's like,
so here's your rules.
Surprise.
If there are two sources that are legitimate, talk about it in public if you feel like you must. If there is one source plus chatter and you have esoteric or expert or professional knowledge in this area, you can talk about it or investigate it, but I would highly advise you to not do so publicly because you don't have anything real. Chatter is not news. Chatter is chatter. That is where you go to your private Discord and talk about your friends like, hey, what do you think's going on with this? But you don't like tweet about it because you're just going to contribute to the disinformation. And if you're not sure if you have enough knowledge of chatter and journalism to talk about something even among your friends, maybe just wait for the news. Like, don't spread misinformation. That's pretty much the best way to go in these situations. But no, EA is not being bought by Amazon at this time. So some other news. Looks like we're going to get from Disney. Ravensburger appears to be involved in this. They're publishing a trading card game called Lorcana, which the marketing copy helpfully explains is a portmanteau of lore and arcana.
I didn't know that. I couldn't. Oh, that makes sense. Now. I did not know.
Breaking news.
What a shocker.
It's we'll see. I feel like, much like with Keyforge, Scott and I are definitely gonna get some cards and poke at this so we can talk about it. That's a Geek Night. I'll pay $20 ish to get a Geek Nights episode.
Buy 2 starter decks, play it a few times.
But it is purportedly a pan-Disney trading card game, and the marketing copy we've gotten so far, I'm just going to quote it because it tells you exactly everything you need to know about this game. Quote, "The breadth and scope of Disney characters represented in this game will be unprecedented, and it will contain more original Disney artwork than any other single product ever created." That implies to me that this game is not going to be much of a game. Or in the very least, it is going to be a very...
part is definitely the highlight, right?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure this is going to be...
talked about the rules much. It's what every other tabletop Kickstarter does. Right?
I'm pretty sure this is going to be the Disney pins in card form.
Yeah, one positive I see from this is that if it's successful at all, right, is that some portion of money is going to go to a whole bunch of illustrators.
Oh, yeah.
Like an army of illustrators that are going to suddenly have a lot more demand for work because they need a lot of card artwork suddenly.
Yeah.
Everyone who can draw a Mickey Mouse or a Spider-Man or a Star Wars, or whatever other shit Disney owns now.
And in terms of
work,
I think in terms of the gameplay, the best case scenario would be, honestly, if this game is about the level of complexity and strategic interaction as the Pokemon card game.
Pokemon is a good card game. If you can make a game as good as the Pokemon card game, this could become a real thing.
It really could. But the opposite side, it could be a pin-like collector nonsense game where there's no game behind it.
It's going to be collector nonsense.
Oh, yeah.
100%. So that's why even if the game is good, right, it's like, I'm not going to go beyond just get 2 starter packs, whatever, because I know it's going to be some rando money hole. If, they were actually going to go down and do the an LCG-ish model like Netrunner had where you could just buy a box and all the cards are in there, then I'd be willing to deal with like a lower standard of
no, they've already said. So it'll release in fall 2023, and there will be 4 sets of cards released annually, basically forever is what I can tell.
Yep.
So
they stop.
Yeah. So they're just gonna every quarter they're gonna release some cards, and that worries me a little bit because
I'm not gonna make the rest of my life this game.
Oh,
so
no,
it's gonna be a few starters in the end.
But I guess the danger of that statement is that if there are that many cards, especially if they continue after the first year with that many releases, that implies that the game has a very shallow Pareto frontier and that the cards will all be mechanically largely indistinct from each other and that the artwork is the primary thing.
Shit that Magic does.
Oh, yeah, but I'm saying that they will likely not have significantly radically interesting cards unless...
Magic has interesting cards.
Yeah, Magic also has a very different type of game and player base. I do not know if this game will be complex enough to support that. How often do Pokemon release entire sets of new cards?
Pretty frequently.
How frequently, though?
Several times a year.
Nah.
They rotate cards. You just haven't played a trading card game in a very This is why they rotate. Right?
Well,
if they don't rotate, then it becomes the Pareto frontier becomes like a mess, right? Because there's incredibly powerful cards sit around, and you basically have.
I'm not talking about game balance. I'm thinking more around, especially because this is a Disney game and probably aimed at kids. I worry and suspect it will be less complex than the Pokemon game. And
who knows? The companies basically don't see, the game mechanics as a selling point. They never talk about it, and therefore I don't believe that they invest time into making sure that part is good. And, but it's still, this is going to be a huge thing, so I'll at least, poke it one time.
Yep. This is absolutely very likely going to be a huge thing, at least when it launches, and then we'll see what happens. But I feel like the Disney IP is too strong.
There are lots and lots of, games that have shown, if you have, spent any time in a game store, there are a lot of games that come, right? And they make a big splash immediately.
Yep.
And might even be more popular than the bigger games. But then they fade fast, right? So I remember there was a Star Wars one with dice, right? It's that came out 3 weeks or maybe a month. People were playing it, buying it, gone.
Hey, remember at RIT? Remember Mech Warrior Mage Knight?
Yeah, exactly. This keeps happening, right? It's to have a game that comes into the game store and holds for any amount of time. It's that's incredible. You get to level 2, the Netrunner level, where your game is still there month after month, but you're not at the magic level yet, right? And then to get to the magic level, that's you're set.
Now they have said as well, they announced that there will be a robust organized play program. So we'll see what the shape of that is, but that is crucial to this kind of release. So we'll see how it goes. Well, all right. But anyway, things of the day. This is just a cute little animation. It is a song sung to the tune of W-I-T-C-H by Devin Cole, but it's Princess Peach singing about Luigi with a cute sort of puppet stop motion looking animation on it. And this is 35 seconds of extremely cute content.
Okay. So the legendary video game designer Masahiro Sakurai, who has created Kirby, he made Kirby, right? He made Smash Brothers. This is a legendary human being, right? Who will be remembered by nerds forever. He has done something truly incredible. Maybe even this might end up being a greater work than Kirby and Smash Brothers, right? And the other games he's made. He has made a YouTube channel. Right? And on the YouTube channel, he is posting the real deal info, right, with English subtitles, right, of the detail. We always talk about how video games, it's the really good video games are the ones that are polished a whole bunch, right? They spend the extra time to get all the details right. It's he is giving you, this is a person who has pretty much only ever made highly polished games, right? And he's given the lowdown. And even though a lot of the stuff he's talked about so far is stuff I already kind of know, right? It's the fact that he's saying it, right? That someone that legendary is saying a thing that I already know and half figured out on my own is whoa, right?
So I watched a few of these already. They are exactly what we expected when this channel was announced.
Yeah, but this might be the greatest educational resource for anyone who wants to make video games. And he's uploading new videos frequently. The production value is extremely high. The videos are very short, but chock full.
Also, they're getting longer. The newest one is 10 minutes long. Risk and reward.
Well, that's because that one was a topic that needed more minutes. Right?
Yep.
It was special. It's not that they're getting longer overall. And the best one so far was the pause one, where he's look, and he shows how in one video game you just sort of get hit and die, and in another video game you get hit and everything freezes for a second, to pause so you see the impact, and, right? And it's you think about it, and it's oh yeah, video games do that all the time, and that is obvious and what you should do. And it increases the intensity of the impact. It makes for better game feel. It helps the player see what hit them, not just I'm dead mysteriously.
Yep.
Hit me, right? It's but you don't actually realize that, like, I never realized before watching that video that it was, it's this pause that they're doing that makes that happen, right? You'd have to pay really good attention to, like, know that,
We talked about that at length with the video ball guy when we were talking about video ball at a PAX a long time ago.
Yeah, so it's like all these sorts of tricks, if all, and just, game design know-how, it's like if all that knowledge is combined in one place, I think it, and people actually watch these videos, it could elevate, I think, all, video game development across the board.
You know what could use that exact mechanic, just because I'm thinking about it? Cult of the Lamb. It could really use something like that.
Right? Because, like, how many, indie games out there, get these small things wrong or imperfect, and not because it's hard for them to do it. It's not like it costs more money to, but it's like just because you don't have the experience of the person who made Kirby. So to be able to, like, advance your game industry development knowledge, like, so much, this is a huge deal. I'm enjoying this YouTube channel more than ever, like maybe any YouTube channel ever. It's
in the meta moment, I will be live at PAX West on Sunday, September 4th, coming up. There obviously will not be a show on Thursday because I'm flying to Seattle. Sunday, September 4th, 12:30 p.m. Pacific time in the Sasquatch Theater, which is in the Sheraton because it starts with S. The panel is losing, and it is actually significantly, radically different from the solo talk I gave on this topic at PAX Australia 2014, the year Scott didn't come with me. Beyond that, the book club book is Binti. We'll do that show. I imagine I'll just read it in all this travel, and then we'll do the book club book on it.
I finished the other non-book club book I was reading, and therefore I can now read the Binti book probably next.
All right, we could probably do we could do a quick show on it next week, because I do have to announce in the meta moment that between Emily and I biking to Rochester from New York over the course of a week, I have to visit some work offices. I'm just going to be out of town for PAX, and then I'm going to be out of town for like the 2.5 weeks at the end of September to bike to Rochester and then fly to London. Then I'm also going to be out of town the first week of October at a different office in Germany. So Geek Nights will have a significant hiatus and will resume the week of October 10th.
Okay.
I hope we can sneak in one episode next week or maybe even the following week. I have this like week gap that straddles 2 weeks between all this nonsense. So that's the time.
Free time for me in addition to my Fridays.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's...
Maybe I'll get this website more. I did work on it a little bit the other day.
I got a pretty good pipeline for putting all the markers in the episodes that I got to do now. Like, I can do that real quick now. I've been doing it on every episode.
Good, because that functionality took me like a few days to work to develop.
I've been doing it on every episode to make sure I have a good process. So all the episodes we've uploaded since we last talked about that have all those markers in them.
Okay.
So yeah, let's just go right into it. So I want to point out, we did way back in 2007, we did an episode called Solitaire and Simple Games, which is not quite what we're talking about today. We did a recent show called The Number of Players, where we talked about what are the fundamental differences between 1 player, 2 player, 3+ player, and I guess 0 player. But now we also did one show specifically on Solitaire Puzzles, and we did make a lot of distinctions in that episode around what is a puzzle versus a game. Don't get sweaty, you nerds. There's a big overlap there. This is not a hard definition. Don't worry about it too much. But there has been a trend that was actually relatively rare until I want to say about 6 years ago. I started seeing a lot more of them just sort of all at once, even though they definitely existed before. But regular old looking tabletop games that are either designed for 1 player or have a 1-player variant that was in the rule book.
Yeah, I'm seeing this much more frequently, right? Is that, there are games that are clearly, right? Even look at Root, right? It's like Root is clearly a political multiplayer game for 3+ players, right? If you reduce Root to a 2-player game,
it's terrible.
That is no longer a political game. It's a completely different game, even though a lot of mechanics, rules would be identical.
Rules work, but it becomes a local optimization game, and it's just not good. It's not worth playing.
you can also, they sort of do like this, there's the clockwork, a cat, whatever. I forget what they call it. Right. And it's like, yeah, it's like you basically have an AI player in there. Right.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, what the hell is that garbage, right? And now it's like a one-player game against, a deck of cards, right? Is this like Pandemic? It's a one-player game against a deck of cards?
Yep. Well, you could do that we have 2 humans and that thing, and that edges more into it provides a deck of cards of randomness that's controlled, and then the game becomes yet another game entirely. Now the game is which of the 2 players exploit the mechanics of that third bot player plus locally optimized.
Right. But regardless, it's a completely different game. It's in no relation to the game that was made, but game developers, game designers in the tabletop board game space, they feel, I believe, right, that they have to do this. They must come up with some either solo variant of their game when they publish it, because there is a large portion of, especially in the people who kickstart board games, right, who are buying games for the collectible material parts, right, but people who have no friends, they don't have anyone to play games with, or don't have anyone to play games with frequently, or they don't have anyone to play games with nearby, or they don't have anyone who will play games of this nature with them, or will, enjoy games in the same way that they do, that they could have a good experience playing the game with those people. And so having the solo variant in there, or, making it a solo board game, intentionally, will get those people to buy the game. And even if they don't actually play it by themselves, right, the fact that they could gives themselves permissions to buy it for themselves. And if they do play it by themselves, okay, they do. And you still, by adding those extra rules, you're able to sell another copy of the game. And so having solo play rules in tabletop games has over the past several years, I'd say 5 years maybe, has become extremely commonplace. I'm seeing more games with solo than without.
Now, there's nothing wrong with these modes, and some of these are pretty good, but I will fully disclose, I am not personally a big fan of these, and that I've rarely found them worth playing, especially if the alternative was playing a game with my friends, right there at the same table.
Obviously.
So this takes a lot of forms, and I think it's worth sort of walking through sort of all the different things this looks like, because one example that I saw way back is Agricola had single-player rules.
What are the Agricola single-player rules?
You never looked at them?
No.
It's basically just play the game with some fairly arbitrary limitations to make it not stupid. You still get your deck of improvements, you're sort of constrained, and it's almost more like a Sim City. It's more like, all right, here's the constraints, here's what you got. Do the actions and follow these rules, but you're mostly playing Agricola mechanics, just with a few things to force decisions, like worker placement by yourself without something else going on doesn't really mean anything. And the game really just comes down to just try to get a high score. Maybe you play it again with the same seed and see if you can optimize better. Can you get the maximum possible score with that seed? Maybe play it again with a different seed.
The same thing as playing Slay the Spire, if you think about it.
It is. I was actually going to bring up Slay the Spire as effectively, even though it's a video game, and even though Slay the Spire technically could be a tabletop game, though the deck of cards you would need and the mechanics you would need to deal with all that fiddly nonsense would make it impossible. But I also guarantee there is someone out there who wants that and would play it.
Anyway.
I think that would be harder to play than Advanced Squad Leader.
Yeah, probably. A lot of solo board games are simply, they're not puzzles, right? Like a Sudoku, where they're the true puzzle, the pure puzzle is A, perfect information. It's not hiding anything from you. B, there's nothing random, right? And C, there's one solution. And then once you have that solution, it's the puzzle is done. Jigsaw puzzle. You put it together. Right? It's it's together, the end, right? These solo board games that of this variety are optimization puzzle, right? Where it's you do it, you always win, basically. You never lose, kinda, but you have a score at the end, and so you can do the puzzle again.
Yeah.
And it's like, how well can you do the puzzle? It's like, so you think it's like jigsaw puzzle. How fast did you put it together? 1 minute, 5 minutes, 10, well, I guess 1 minute would be better, but it's like, can you do it faster? Right. It's like, can you in some way do it better? Blindfolded, right? It's like,
Or here's an example, Yahtzee. Yahtzee supports one player just fine. You can just play Yahtzee by yourself anytime. And you know what? Kind of fun. Still.
Oh, but Yahtzee has some luck to it, which puts it in a different category.
Well, yeah, because that's the second category where you've got a single player game. This is what breaks it out from a puzzle. It's either introducing randomness, so now you have to react to it. Ideally,
some of the optimization ones are randomness in the setup.
Yeah,
right? Randomness in the setup, you could do a sort of a pure optimization puzzle. But if there's randomness during the game, now that you're in a different territory.
Yep. Some games do this, like Yahtzee with dice. Some games do it with a special deck of cards. I've seen tabletop games that are designed for like 3 to 5 players or 2 to 5 players have the one-person variant, and usually there's a separate special deck of cards or something that's only used for that version of the game.
Yeah, and that deck of cards effectively is a player. Like, instead of having a human make decisions, you just have a randomized deck of cards. You draw from it according to some rules. Maybe there's a flow chart, and it tells you if there was another human there, and you weren't alone, what they would do on their turn.
Now, one area that one-player variants of games that do support more players or intend more players, an aspect of this is that it can be used to learn the base mechanics and base heuristics of a broader game without having to play with other people. I could see that being appealing.
Strategy, though.
Nope, but like you could play single player Agricola and learn the ins and outs of like, irrespective of what other players might do, what's more or less powerful. Like, how good are sheep really in the broader meta of the game?
And if there's not a lot of player interaction, there obviously is in a Agricola, right, with the blocking of workers, but there isn't much more than that. So it's like, if you can, look at a particular hand of cards and, play a really efficient, lane on Agricola, even if someone else is, like blocking your spots once in a while, you'll still have a really good chance of winning.
Yeah.
if you know how to optimize.
But of course, the danger there is that you will optimize to the easy mode where there is no one aggressively, actively countering you or getting in your way. Try to do the things that work in one-player Agricola against people who know how to play Agricola, and you're going to get crushed. But two,
it could be.
Most people who want to do that are probably better served by just getting whatever app there is for the game. If there is one. Just play against AIs.
Yeah, probably like a Carcassonne app.
Yep. I mean, I still play Hiroshima Hex and Carcassonne sometimes while I'm pooping. That's still a thing.
Especially since, an app's, the quote AI in an app is, especially on the hard mode, is going to be way better an opponent than, and take less time consuming than a deck of cards or flowchart opponent.
Yep. So,
but the thing is, these ones where there's randomness during the game, whether it's a simulated opponent or not, those ones are not a pure optimization thing. You can't like sort of rank yourself in those because it's like you could just get unlucky, right? Like you could play Pandemic by yourself and it's like you lose, but it's just because the deck of cards was just really awful. They got shuffled up in such a way that like you couldn't win.
It is possible you try to play Yahtzee by yourself and you roll 5 ones literally every time you roll the dice all the way to the end. Like that could happen.
That could happen, right? So what it's really, these types of games, what they're more about is, okay, here's a random shit is going to happen, right? Will I succeed this time, right? Oh, I didn't? Okay. Well, I'll just try again. And it's like, right?
Yep.
And your play decisions, you sort of have to play the odds. You might memorize all the random things that could happen, which would help you significantly. But it's like sometimes you win and sometimes you won't.
Yep.
And okay, it's not that. It's like winning and losing. I think sort of loses, sort of the emotion, right? It's like if you lose in a game like that, it's like, well, I didn't lose to anyone. It was kind of random.
Yep. Well, I'm idly working on the 14th ascension with the orb guy and slay the spire. Like when I lay down in bed.
Right, but that's different, right? There, it's like, okay, I optimized and I did better than I did the last time on the same loadout. It's like I learned something, right? I advanced. There's some sort of sense of accomplishment there, right? That's greater. It's like you playing Dig Dug, you get a new high score. Right? It's like same deal, right? It's like you feel good about that. Puzzle. I have not been able to solve the puzzle. I have solved the puzzle.
Yep.
I finally figured it out, right? But the game with the simulated AI, with the random things that happen during the game, it's sort of like, what's the meaning of doing that, right? Besides maybe practicing, but that practice is such a weak practice. It's like not helping you that much.
Yep. I do think a big driver of it is people lack enough people to play games with, and they're desperate to play games. But there's also and I've seen a lot of people do this at PAXs pre-COVID, is they play the single-player variant of a game or a single-player game that's quick just because they're waiting for their friends to finish something. They don't have anyone nearby. Like, that's pretty common. But granted, personally, I'm the kind of person who would just turn to my Switch or conversation or play a game on my phone while I waited.
I mean,
but
if you play, Klondike Solitaire, the classic Solitaire, Microsoft Solitaire to most people, right, is a game where it's random during, it's like you don't know the loadout, it's hidden information. So effectively, it's random during play, right?
Yep.
It's not, even though it's chronologically set up randomness because they're hidden, it's gameplay randomness. It's like, it's just an idle activity, right? But it's like if you win at it, it's like, okay. If you lose at it, okay. It might have been an unwinnable hand. You don't know.
Well, if you win at Klondike Solitaire, you got to pick the cards up and throw them all over the room.
Yeah, hopefully they're digital cards. Right? But if you are just trying to pass the time, okay. But if it's a more complex board game, right, and you're playing you might play, one use of the solo mode that could be legitimate could be just passing the time. Like, it's like, yeah, you don't put much value in it, but just keeping your mind
So I'll admit,
something.
When I lived up in the mountains, before we moved in together in Beacon, and like between our IT and our future lives, I was living alone in the mountains in a rented room, and I didn't have any internet, and I didn't get cell reception where I was living. I didn't know anyone in town. I didn't have any money. And one day, I set up Settlers of Catan, and I played it against myself basically for an entire afternoon over and over again to simulate the concept of what if all 4 players had perfect intuition on the full game state and knew everything everyone else knew? What could happen? Like, what would that game actually look like?
Mm-hmm.
And it was an interesting mathematical sort of like exploration into Settlers of like, what are the fundamental core mechanics? And I got some moderate enjoyment out of that. And you know what? The main reason I did it was not that exploration. It was that there was fucking nothing else to do. And I'd already read like 3 books that morning.
Right. But yeah, I guess another possible reason you might want the solo mode would be, it's like, maybe you didn't buy the game yet. Or maybe you're thinking about selling it and you just haven't played it and there's no one to play it with, right? It's like you could learn the rules that way. It would help you when you're teaching someone else, right? The real rules. Or you could find out if you even like the game, right? Because like if you don't like the solo game, right, you can sort of intuit what the real multiplayer, real version of the game is going to be like, right? And sort of be able to tell, if you should even attempt playing the real version, or just be like, get this game out of here. It's not,
Yeah, the danger there, though, is I have found, because there's an increasing breadth of games that are designed as single player from day one. Like, maybe they have a variant that's multiplayer. It's almost the inverse of how things were before. And when we're talking about a game that is designed for multiple players but has a one-player variant, I personally treat those as different games that are just similar. And they tend to be pretty inelegant. They tend to have to make some leaps to make single player work, as opposed to the games that are designed for this, which often have extremely clever mechanics to allow you to play a game solo, especially single player RPGs.
All right, yeah. So I was about to say, if you are, this kind of person who's got no one to play with, right? And, it's like you're looking for an activity. Right? It's like, yeah, I could encourage you to actually go do some other hobby entirely, right? Like painting or something, right? And say that's a better use of your time than a solo board game. And that's true. But you really like gaming. That's what you want to do. You just don't have other people right now or whatever your circumstances. My recommendation would be to go with the solo tabletop RPGs. Because
Hell yeah.
the solo tabletop RPG is a creative experience, right? It's like I have a bunch of them. I've been meaning to play them, right? And it's not like I haven't because I don't have anyone to play with because they're solo. It's like, it's just because I haven't had time. Maybe I should when Rim's out. Anyway, the solo tabletop RPGs, most of the ones that I have are a creative endeavor. You are producing a story, an artwork, a something, right? While you are playing this, right? And you're crafting an experience. It's or at very least, it'll be a memorable thing for you, right? You know, that you know, even though it's fictional. And I feel, at least personally to me, I feel that is much more worthwhile way to spend the limited time you have on, you know, alive on Earth, right? Than to play, you know, Root alone, sadly, right? Or like Oath alone, sadly, or something like that, right? You know, that doesn't seem to as a good use of someone's time.
You know, an example of these, there were all those choose your own adventure adjacent role-playing books that had mechanics. One of them I remember that I played as a kid. It's basically a choose your own adventure type book, but it had a system where you'd go to one of these back pages and you would literally be told to hold the book open, hold a pencil at least a foot in the air, close your eyes and drop it, and wherever it landed, that would be the number you rolled. And it was just a single player RPG with leveling and an inventory and all sorts of nonsense. There's lots of stuff like that out there, and some of these date back to the 70s.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it might be it might have been a thing of the day way back when, but there was one of the things like what's it called? Crowdfunded, right? It was a solo RPG called Amending. It's back on the shelf.
Oh yeah, the one with the sewing.
Right. It comes with a map, and you're basically there's a deck of cards with like prompts, and you're telling a story of like your adventure and whatnot, you know, and then you're sewing into this piece of cloth, right? The journey that you're taking, right? And, you know, you could just keep it simple and just draw a path on the map, you know, with just straight thread. But it's like, it encourages you to like, let's say you, I don't know, fought a dragon. It's like, all right, well, embroider a little dragon symbol in that spot, right? You know, if you can, maybe learn how, something, you know, it's like, and then at the end, you've produced this work, but you've also played a game, right? Which is what you enjoy playing games, right? You know, you might not have just enjoyed embroidering for its own sake.
Mm-hmm.
And there's many such games like that. You know, I got this one more recently called You Are the Dungeon. And it's like you're basically, the game is a game in where you create a dungeon, but you are the dungeon, a lot like in Vast, where you are the dungeon. Right? I'm kind of excited to play it. I just haven't done it yet.
And one thing that I think is interesting is that a designed for single player board game or tabletop game of any kind, especially like non-RPG ones, are not mechanically really distinct at their core from most co-op tabletop games. Because, you know, we're talking about Richard Garfield and, you know, talking about how games are actually structured. A team acts as a player in terms of most interactions. So a game that is designed for one player arguably is equally well designed for one team, or a co-op game can be a 1+ player count. Mm-hmm. Depending on the nature of the game.
The co-op game. But yeah, it's like I bring up Pandemic, right? Yeah. Pandemic, I don't think sells itself as a one-player game. It sells itself as a co-op game. But I've said this a zillion times. The original game, Pandemic, is basically no different than several people sitting around a single hand of Klondike Microsoft Solitaire and, you know, sort of all talking to each other about like what to do next, right? Should we draw cards? Should we move that pile? It's like,
Wait,
right?
here's my co-op RPG. So we play Klondike Solitaire. Everyone's sitting in front of the same deck together, and to decide which card, like what the next move is, players have to play a full Burning Wheel session, duels of wits. Wow, the dwarf wants to make sure the ace never gets out. And there you go. That's a game.
Whatever. But yeah, there is value, I guess, just to end the show, right? I don't know how much more there is to say, but I think there is value in games having single player modes. It certainly doesn't hurt the multiplayer mode for the single player mode to just be there.
Yep.
I'm not going to be like, get rid of that. That's, if it sells more copies of the game and it helps game designers, developers, publishers get more money.
Yep.
It's like great,
There's definitely an audience. There's definitely people who like these games. Designing a game for one player is a fascinating game design challenge for tabletop.
But I don't see, the sort of non-puzzle, right, non-optimization single player tabletop games as like, really that worthwhile of an experience, and it really not a very replayable experience, very much compared to the other options for solo play that are out there.
Yeah, I mean, for me, honestly, the bar at this point would be something that pulls my brain in about the same level as Slay the Spire.
Yeah. So, but that would be an optimization one.
Exactly.
But if you like them, all right, enjoy, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. Just they're not really our bag. And I think they're going to be...
But they become a huge thing lately. So I don't think we can like ignore them. And I think even if I somehow miraculously made like some multiplayer board game, right, I might just give in and, have 2 and 1 player versions, however much I didn't like them, just because... they would get me sales, and all I'd have to include was like a couple extra pages.
See, that is why so many games will say 3 to 5 players, but you got to go to the BGG where some nerd will be like, it only works with 4, trust me.
Yeah.
Case in point, Hans and Teutonica, you play that with 3 or with 5. Never play it with 4.
I also see a lot of games that's like on the box will say 3 to 5 players. They don't include solo or 2-player rules, and some nerds go out and make some anyway. All right.
I will say right now, I have read several of those proposed sets of rules for a bunch of games.
Right?
They are not great. Those are not.
Great, but people are desperate, in desperate times, desperate measures. So.
Yeah. All right. Easy show. We actually went the normal amount of time.